Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm going to do a slow introduction now because I know we're gaining users and attendees here as I speak by the second. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Professor Max Kiesner, Professor of Instrumental Music here at Cosumnes River College, and we want to welcome you to Spring 22. Think of that for a minute. It's been so many years doing this. In fact, this series was started back in 2019 when we first went online during the pandemic, and it's something we've got a lot of enjoyment out of, bringing special guest artists from all over the world and all over the country to you free of charge, to our CRC community, of course, to our CRC music students. So I am so excited to bring to you today an artist I think should be a household name after today. And if you hadn't heard of his music or his playing just yet, make sure that you do follow him on social media after this. You will be overjoyed with what you hear. Someone who's very special, a trumpet player, Grammy-nominated recording artist, all around amazing person. And I was just telling him before the session that he should be ready for profuse acknowledgement of his abilities and quality of character. He is honestly one of the warmest, most welcoming, funniest, most talented individuals I've ever known in my life. And would you please give a big CRC in the studio welcome to Victor Garcia, all the way from Chicago.
Thank you so much, bro. It's so nice to see you again. We've made some pretty awesome memories back in the day, and we've collected lots of gray hairs along the way, but here we are. Huh?
We have. It's really great to connect with you now, and that's one of the great things I love about this series, is that I kind of get to go through, my context and think, who's doing something really amazing that would have a great story to tell our students and kind of teach through their experience. And I've been thinking of you for so long, and glad we got a chance to schedule this out.
Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. Seriously. I like to start with, just how I know you, and then I like to give the artist a bit of chance to kind of tell their life story and however many minutes that might take. So sure. Where did this start? This starts back at Northern Illinois University, right? Where we met. We were playing in the ensemble together. We were in the trumpet studio together. And before I even met you, I had heard whispers of you, right? So this is just giving everybody a taste, right? Whispers there. Someone was like, oh, this trumpet player from U of I, right, University of Illinois, he's transferring, man. He's killing. He's gonna be awesome, man. His name is Victor Garcia, right? So I heard all these great things coming out, and then got a chance to play with you, and have never been, I don't know what the word is. I've just been always impressed and just amazed at what you bring to the table as a musician and as a person, of course, as I mentioned before.
That means a lot, bro.
Yeah. And, I got a chance to sub for you. Those were big shoes to fill. And some of my most humbling musical experiences
It was college, man. It must have been, you were filling in some flip-flops for me, man.
Oh my God, no, you were a professional from day one. I mean, honestly, I know you're a very humble person, and you'll deny all this to the day you die. But really, I do want to give people a taste of who you are before we dive into your biography too far. So is that all right if I play one of your infamous gig videos? This is
sure. I thought you were going to ask me to tell some jokes, but that's cool.
All right, so this is a video of a solo that you took, and what did you say your wife calls these videos? The up the nose shots?
Up the nose shots, yeah.
Okay. But I think this will give everyone a really good idea of your ability on the trumpet. This is an improvised solo with the Latin jazz group.
Oh, this is actually with Tito Puente.
Oh, this is with Tito Puente? Okay, so for real. All right. So for all of my jazz studies students out there, my jazz history students, we'll talk about that in week 10. So. Oh my gosh, just unbelievable. So, so that's how I know you. Right? Just as an incredible person, incredible player. How would you describe yourself to other people? Tell us your life story.
Well, ever since I was in my mom's stomach, my mom and dad met in a church choir. My dad was the director, and my mom was the young hot thing, playing guitar and singing. So it's funny. She told me that she was playing guitar, and at like month 7 or 8, she decided she couldn't play anymore because every time she played, I would like kick the guitar off her stomach. I was just so excited with music, and so I grew up playing church music. The guitar, that was my first instrument where I would play, and well, actually, I should rephrase that. It was the first instrument where I gigged. So I would play guitar and sing with my dad and brother. But when I was about 5 years old, I started taking lessons with this Russian lady who, I don't know, my dad was an acupuncturist, and he had all these people from all the different walks of life come to him for treatment. And there was this one lady who was a really good piano teacher. And so they had a barter system where he would obviously take care of her and give her medicine, and she would come over and teach me and my brother. And she was the old school where she would take the ruler and, smack your hands if your technique wasn't right, So it was, but, she always loved my drive. Like, she only had to use that on me one time because I was super into it since the beginning. I was always practicing. And then when I got to high school, that's when I had to choose a band instrument. And my dad brought home a bunch of instruments from a flea market. He's a hoarder and a half. So I remember I got in a fight with him that day. So I got last pick. I really wanted to be a drummer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I was super bummed about that. My little brother picked the drums immediately. My other brother didn't want to play anything, so he took the flute because he knew he could like throw it in his book bag. He didn't have to carry anything. My sister picked the clarinet because she liked the boy that played clarinet. So she's like, "Oh, I want to sit next to him." I'm like, okay. So the first time I played trumpet, I was not happy with it because I was stuck with the trumpet essentially. And then I tried to make a sound. I remember grabbing the mouthpiece going, it doesn't even work. I told my dad, like, had no clue how to make a sound on it. And, so it didn't come to me naturally at all. But luckily I had a lot of harmony and music in my head where I was able to little by little piece together how to play a major scale. And it wasn't until my second year of high school where I finally got a trumpet teacher. But yeah, it's always been one of those things in my personality. When something's a challenge, I'm going to go for it just to prove to myself that I can. And, many, many years later, and I'm still trying to prove it to myself.
Wow,
never
that's
ends.
so interesting. I didn't know any of that information. Man, that's so illuminating too, because you kind of hear that in your playing, like you're so joyful in the struggle, you know what I mean? And that's like an essential part of playing jazz, I think, fundamentally, but like you definitely hear that in your playing. It's like you're always reaching for more and enjoying whether you actually are successful or you just make it, you know what I mean? Like that's part of
Exactly.
the fun, And trumpet
Absolutely.
is such a hard instrument, and you play it what seems like effortlessly, So you started to get a teacher in high school, and then you went into music in college. Was that like an easy decision? Was it like, yeah, of course, I'm going to study music. There's no other option.
Well, the reason why it was an easy decision for me is because I honestly wasn't planning on going to college. A lot of my friends were gangbangers at the time. I lived in a pretty rough neighborhood, and I used to, the other thing that I really wanted to do was play basketball because all we would do is, hang out at the park and play ball all day. A bunch of them would drink. I wasn't into that or anything, other stuff that they were doing, but they were my friends, so I always hung out with them. But I remember specifically, and it gives me like a chill down my spine because I remember I had a big concert in my high school, and I had to practice because they had given me like a little section to play as a solo, and it wasn't much, but I wasn't that great. I was, still learning and stuff. And my friend invited me to go out. I don't know what he wanted to do, honestly, but I told him, man, I can't today. And the next day I got a call that he had been killed by rival gang members. And like he basically took a little group and all three of them were killed in an alley. Like, and I could have been a part of that group. So it just, I remember that day I thought, okay, I can do that and it's kind of playing roulette with my life every day. Or I could just do this, which I really enjoy and doesn't seem to be getting me into any trouble. It's actually opened up my world to, you know, a lot of different people from all walks of life, a lot of different cultures. Um, you know, you were asking me about like my Latin music experience, but the honest truth is growing up, you know, we just heard Mexican music at home, or my dad was super into the Beatles. So when I got to high school, I literally knew all the lyrics to all the Beatles songs because that's what we were listening to, and that's what I tried to play on the guitar and sing, which is kind of funny in hindsight. But it wasn't until I got to high school and I had some opportunities to meet some musicians that were playing salsa, for example. And one of them said, "Hey, you want to come to a rehearsal and, you know, see if you'd be a good fit for this band?" That was Ricky Lewis's band. So, you know, if it wasn't for that experience, that exposure to these kids from the Merit School of Music, I wouldn't have found my way to the music probably. I mean, maybe I would have in a different way, but I always like to, I have that cosmos mentality. I don't know if you're into the Neil deGrasse Tyson
Sure.
show, or I mean, Carl Sagan initially, but how, you know, you nick a rock this way 1 inch and then all of a sudden, like, it starts a new civilization on a new planet or something. You know, I always like thinking of how I just, you know, narrowly avoided death in an alley this 1 year and how I somehow magically got into this music school that opened up these amazing opportunities where I started gigging. And in one of those gigs, I got nicked my career this way where someone asked me to record on their album for the first time. And that led to me starting to play wedding gigs because of this one guy. You know, it's just very interesting how, you know, a career has just kind of fallen into my lap strictly because of how dedicated I was to conquering this metal piece of plumbing. You know what I mean?
Well, that is so interesting. And thank you for sharing that story and your experience, man. That must have been, you know, just dramatic and obviously a formative
absolutely
moment in your life. And I think you're absolutely right about that. Like if you find something that you're very interested in and dedicated to, passionate about, you can kind of see a way forward because there's all this chaotic potential around us, and all you try to do is create some kind of like habitable order out of it. And for many musicians, it's just simply the challenge of trying to do something like play music, whether it's a Beatles tune or, you know, or a jazz tune, or learn to improvise, or whatever the case might be. And you're right, it kind of like it cuts all the noise out, you know, sometimes, and you can create your path forward in that way. It's such an amazing insight. And one thing you mentioned, what I think is very true of musicians in general, is that we do tend to be those kinds of people who get the worldview because we get to interact with so many different kinds of folks. And it is about the music at the end of the day, I mean, from a practical standpoint, but we're really very people oriented, right? It's about the hang, it's about creating a family kind of thing with our groups, with the bands and the ensemble we play in. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like you really embrace that. And I know, just again, you personally, but all the other accounts of people that know you just know you as the warmest, kindest, you know, person that they've ever known, someone who's really good to work with as well from a professional standpoint. So maybe that's just something that was innate to you, or you figured out like, hey, yeah, I can get more gigs if I'm just a good person, you know, that kind of thing.
I think ever since I was young, that was just my personality, you know. I was kind of a mama's boy, so she would say to do something, okay, mom, okay. You know, she would, you know, I was play by the rules and try to uplift others. And I was also the oldest. So, you know, a lot of my upbringing was like sharing and, you know, helping my siblings with whatever they were going through, like helping them with their homework and I mean, I remember from a young age, I thought one day I'm going to have 10 kids. So I always like loved the whole concept of like passing love on, you know? And for me, it was like like being a parent was the thing that was like most clear to me. But along the same way, I also learned that you can do that as a teacher. And I never had interest in being a teacher, but I remember the first time someone came up to me after a gig. I was still at Northern, actually. It was playing a salsa gig, and this gentleman came up to me. He was older. He said, "Hey, do you give lessons?" I'm like, I don't know. I said, "I don't know." What does that mean, you know? And he said, "Well, can I get your number and we could talk about trumpet?" I was like, "Sure." And I was nervous because I had no idea if, I was going to lead this guy astray. But what I learned is that the best teacher is the best student, and I am such a student of music, like constantly all the time, that I ended up going over 2 hours with this guy because he asked me questions. I was like, "Oh, I know the answers to that because I figured this out and blah, blah, blah." And, I was obviously not organized enough to understand like a better way to give information. But I learned that day that to watch that light go on, it like, I love that feeling to see the light bulb just click on when somebody understands a certain concept and they can take that and create something beautiful from that. So I started realizing I do like teaching. I don't like babysitting. I don't want to sit there and be like, "Oh, can you take your finger out of your nose, Khalil?" Or, that's an actual experience I had growing up. I'm like, I don't know if I want to be here. Hey, stop grabbing his underwear or whatever,
Yeah.
But if someone really wants to learn and be there, man, whatever's mine is yours. I'm happy to pass it on.
So here are a few questions. There's one in the chat. One of our jazz history students asked, "Were you good at basketball? Do you think that would have been an alternate career path if?"
Man, I had a great shot. I had a 3-point. I had a pretty high percentage, and I had great handles. But the problem was, and I don't want to call my dad out too much, but he would say, "Oh, no, mijo, los negritos te van a ganar," which is basically saying, "Man, all the black kids are going to beat you," because they were all like way taller than me. And, it's hilarious, because it was kind of true, but he was definitely like a little too harsh sometimes with his words. He did not mince them.
Sure.
So, but, luckily I learned on my own, and it happened like during my senior year. I remember I was playing a game, but I was playing street ball, so we didn't call no fouls. And I got elbowed in the face like really bad, where my face was swollen. And I remember, I didn't care. I was like, let's go, let's play. But later on, when I tried to play the horn, I was like, I couldn't get a sound anymore. I was like, yeah, this might have to stop if I want to continue doing this, so.
Yeah, some things we have to leave aside based on our profession, right? We have to be careful.
Exactly.
Yeah, they talk about that, especially with piano players, right? You see those, the virtuosos wearing gloves around and everything, just protecting their assets, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So,
or J-Lo insuring her butt for $1 million. That's
for real?
That was a funny. Anyway, it's just.
That's next level music business stuff.
Exactly.
So let's play a little bit more. Again, you're a working recording artist in Chicago. Chicago's a big scene. There's a lot of jazz, there's a lot of Latin jazz, there's a lot of wedding gigs, there's a lot of all kinds of stuff, orchestral music. And one of the groups that you play in is called Afincao. And we have a video from your Facebook page that's labeled Victor Garcia laying down one of his usual sick solos. And I can attest to that. I think that's appropriately named. So can we cue up that clip and take another listen?
Sure.
Geez, it's just, you're such a beast, man. You're such a monster.
Oh man, thanks, bro. I go for it.
Right, you go for it, but that's it. It's like I mean, I keep on thinking to myself when I watch this stuff, like, that shouldn't be possible. This is not normal, right? Like, we were even talking ahead of time, like, there are all these what you say, closet Coltrane's, like, people who can just play their butts off. And like, I think you're one of those individuals where it's just like, you know, it seems like you're surrounded by people who can all play, but man, I don't know, there's just something so unique about your approach. And I mean, I'd love to talk to you about like your approach to playing.
Sure.
To me, what comes through, of course, is a lot of Freddie Hubbard in terms of like a straight up trumpet musical influence. But like, there's this really super joyful and super playful energy that comes through. So like, two questions. How do you do that? How do you do that? Is that an accurate assessment? And then like, how did you actually learn to improvise and kind of make up music in the moment like that? And maybe that ties into the conversation about ear training and that kind of thing that we were having before. But
definitely a bit, but I am a firm believer that everyone has a distinct musical personality that unless you learn how to let it out, it's almost like your ideas are prisoners in your mind. You know, like it's there, but you have to understand what the key is to unlock that door. And, you know, for example, it's something as simple as on the 5 chord, to understand like all the different sounds that you can play over a dominant. And in my mind, for example, organize that in a way where it's from the most, what's the term? Dissonant, consonant, the most consonant, and then it goes to the most dissonant. And the way I organize all that information in my brain is the same way that I do it when I'm like learning new words and when I'm writing an essay, for example. You don't need big words up top. You don't need to confuse the reader. You want to be as clear with your ideas as possible to tell this story. And as you go on with your story, if the need arises for a fancy word, then sprinkle that in there. You've learned it. You've learned how to use it. And so you can now put it in the way that you express your own ideas. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're kind of talking about this idea that music is a language, right? I mean, I think that's a very popular way to teach improvisation in general, is that it's like you have to have the fundamental vocabulary first. And that the idea of playing, whether it be improvised or even composed, is that, you know, we try to tell a musical story and we start with gathering our audience members, not losing them right away, you know?
Sure.
Like bringing them into the story of the solo. And I think a lot of your solos do that, right? They start off with a more approachable musical content, and then they just grow and expand like a bonfire, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just becomes—
Throw some kerosene on it.
Yeah, just intense. Like, did you kind of learn those techniques inherently, or was it like explained to you?
I think that the first time that I transcribed something, I didn't know that the word transcribe existed. I just remember I had just started playing the trumpet. You know, my reading skills, they were non-existent because I didn't even know that it was a B flat instrument. It's kind of funny. And I just was listening to Just Friends not Just Friends, sorry, Dinner with Friends, Count Basie and Thad Jones solo. And you like, he just goes off.
Yeah.
And you can kind of hear in what he's doing where he kind of starts with an idea that he continues to kind of drill a little bit rhythmically. And to me, it just feels like he's setting you up for the next phase of his story. And then the next phase of the story, he goes into something more exciting, like shakes, or he's using different techniques to make it sound more exciting. And from that first solo, I just realized, like, yeah, what's drawing me to it is that I'm compelled to listen to it. You know, he plays something, and you know, my ADHD might want to be like, okay, see you later. But something pulls me in, like, oh, what? Huh? And then he does something else that's like, oh, that was, and then he does something else. And by the end, I'm at the edge of my seat, like,
Yeah.
I need to hear this again, you know? So
That's
I
great.
think I learned the concept of like you got to pull them in. You got to pull the people in by telling a great story. I mean, a good movie starts with maybe an explosive scene, and the audience is like, "Oh my god, that was crazy!" And then all of a sudden they start like breaking it apart into little pieces, but you're already in it. You're like this, you know.
Yeah.
And so you learn from all that. Like good comedians, you, they come out and they'll say something ridiculous, and you're like, "What? Tell me more," you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So it's all kind of like it's kind of holistic in a way. It's embedded in all art forms, right? And it's kind of intuitive in a lot of ways, things that we can kind of, see and we kind of feel, but like being the artist on the creating end of the process is it takes a little more craft. We have to practice. We have to have the endurance and the ability to do these things, to pull out those tricks in your from your bag and so on. But you mentioned the
Yeah.
word transcribe, right? Which is the idea of hearing something and then writing it down, or at least learning it on your instrument. And I believe you sent a video from your Instagram, which is a transcription. Is that correct?
Yeah, around the summertime, I'm back in school. I'm finishing my bachelor's. I'm going to start a master's next fall, but I really am appreciating the summers and the breaks now because then I don't have to do homework. So I have a running list of transcriptions, like solos that I want to learn. And this was one of the toughest ones that I had tried to go for. And it just feels so nice to be able to write it down, to be able to play it, and then to be able to understand what he's doing so that I can take a lot of those tools for myself and use them in the future, you know? And usually when I do that, I'm able to pinpoint the reasons why what really lured me to that particular solo. So I'm getting better at hearing things. I know exactly what he did. So instead of transcribing a whole solo nowadays, I'll just be like, "Ooh, that's kind of sweet." So I'll start at, I don't know, the minute 50 mark and just transcribe like 25 seconds or something, you know?
So, can you tell us again what the piece was and who originally played it?
Yeah, it's a French trumpet player named Nicolas Fulmer, and my longtime mentor Tito Carrillo, who I'm sure you know about. He hit me to this record, and I fell in love with this guy's sound, his writing. Maybe his playing is a little stiff for me in terms of like the swinging factor, but I think that we can learn something from everyone.
Mm.
So I never, just because they don't swing doesn't mean I can't like understand some really amazing harmonic things that he's getting into, or like his writing. I've transcribed a couple of his tunes because they're so beautifully crafted. And this is a tune, the title track from his CD Fluid.
Fluid. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a listen.
Mhm. I
Oh,
was
good
so
Lord.
excited when I finished that one.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, okay, so a few things. Let's talk about ear training, and then maybe we can pivot into your own compositions because they Yeah, maybe it's just the most natural way to go. So I always knew you as somebody who had the most incredible ears. Like you hear somebody play something, you can respond either with it exactly because you just know what they played. Like you would hear somebody say a sentence and you could just repeat the sentence, but in musical notes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you told an interesting story about how you kind of started your journey down ear training. I think that's one of the things that eludes a lot of people. Like, how do I improve my hearing? So what was your musical journey like in that particular regard?
Well, I'll just start by saying that that's my, when I teach somebody, I mean, anybody could learn how to play trumpet from any great trumpet player. But the thing that I've noticed, the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing today and why I'm able to play with so many different groups and so many different styles, I think is because, well, what I, maybe one day I'll coin it, but I talk about seeing with your ears.
Mm.
You know, if you open your eyes, you have probably, you take about 90% of your information through what you see, right? We needed to be able to cross the street, but nobody trusts their ears that much, you know? And I, since the beginning, when I first started playing with my dad and brother, my dad was an amateur. He had no experience like with actual music notation or anything like that. Everything he learned was someone teaching him. And he basically put on me, he was so busy working, but he would want me to like learn some new songs. He just said, here's the song, good luck. So it was almost like he was throwing me in the middle of the ocean. I'm like, okay, what do I do now? So the thing that really helped me is playing guitar, because in that instrument, you have the ability to play the bass note and then the chord. So I started realizing the more progressions that I played, the more chords I played, I could instantly hear when a chord was major because it felt like it was like illuminating. And when something was sad or a minor, it felt sad to me right away. Like it was like dark. And dominant, which was kind of bluesy in a way. It's hard for me to put into words, but the more you're able to hear it and know exactly what it is, the faster you'll be able to react to it, you know? And I've been in tons of musical situations where that skill, having learned tunes by ear, listening to the bass, I listen to music sometimes like on my head. Everybody's listening to the melody and learning words and this and that. I listen to a song and I have the whole roadmap in my mind. I know exactly what all the chords are, and I can pretty much remember the melody. But you know, my wife's like, "You never learn lyrics." I'm like, "Oh, that's the last thing I listen to."
Yeah, guilty.
But but you have to train yourself, you know, to do that. And by doing that, you can put yourself in any musical situation, and it'll like work to your benefit. Because, as you said, this is a language. I did this one gig in particular, which really highlights the value of this. This group from Sudan, from Africa, they flew in for the big Sudanese 100-year something. I don't even know what they were celebrating. We were rehearsing at 1 in the morning because that was like the time that they were used to rehearsing, really early in the morning in their country. And so I finished a gig and I went straight to this little restaurant up on the north side. And I went into this room full of these musicians who I couldn't understand a word they were saying. I had no idea. They had no charts, and they were playing and singing in odd meters too. So they would go like, you know, stuff like that. And I was like, okay. The flute player who played for me, he was the director, and I would listen for a second and then I played for him like exactly what he played. And you know, I couldn't understand him, but he was like, "Oh, it was good, it was good." Like he was really happy because I was picking it up like this, and all the other horn players in the section, they're like, what is it?" And I was like, "It's this 5 1 2 whatever." I was giving them the degrees, and thinking about music that way, it makes it like so obvious in your mind, almost like looking at colors. Like the reason that you know this is red is because you've been asked countless times as a child, "What color is this?" You know, "What color is that bag over there?" You know, and the more you see red, oh, it becomes more familiar. For me, it's learning progressions that way. Like I hear progression, I'm like, I know exactly what that is because it feels a certain way, you know?
That's a great point. Because the feeling is something that I think, yeah, maybe we don't pay attention to enough sometimes, because it takes something that's highly detailed and complex and it simplifies it, you know what I mean? So often when students are trying to figure out what the chords of a song are, they're trying to go note by note rather than sitting back and taking it in as like a what we would call like a chunking, a group of information, right?
Right, like a sandwich.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's clearly a club sandwich. I can taste all the ingredients there, right? It doesn't matter exactly what they are, but you know the flavor, right?
Right.
And you have like a particular pitch memorized, right? You know, you have a perfect E, and then from there everything else can be derived, right? Once you have your location, your reference point, everything else works out.
Right. Yeah. I got it because of playing guitar. So that E is eternally stuck in my mind, and everybody in the choir would ask me to tune their guitars. They'll give it to me, and I'll go do 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 do. Okay, you're good. Next, do do. Because I had that one note stuck in my head, and it's helped me in many situations. I'm on the bandstand, and the singer calls a tune in a different key.
Yeah.
And then it's my turn to solo. You know, nobody told me the key, but they just expect that I know it. And luckily, I'm able to know pretty much right away what key something is, especially because certain keys feel a certain way to me now. So, you know, I got to figure out a good way to like notate that so I can relay that information. But, you know, I can definitely, you know, relate to a student like what to listen for. What are some things that you should be listening for when you hear harmony? Like how does this chord make you feel? Sit with it. Just the basic major 7. How does it feel to you? Does it remind you of something? Like it starts with intervals, right? I remember specifically on my 16th birthday, I woke up to the smell of one of my favorite meals my mom used to cook, which was chorizo with beans. And the reason that I'm telling this story is because she was in the kitchen cooking that and pancakes at the same time as listening to this group, La Rondalla de Sal, some Mexican group, but they were doing a cover of The Story of Love. So in my dream, as I'm smelling the chorizo with beans, I'm also hearing so I woke up and I'm like, so every time I hear a minor 6th, I can smell pancakes and chorizo with beans, you know? It's an experience for me.
That's amazing.
It's tied specifically with that event. So
it's like a synesthesia, right? Like how some people would see colors as they hear sounds. I mean, I think this is important though, because a lot of people think that music is like this ethereal, just oral experience. And the more it is that, the less it becomes concrete and real to you. And we do often have to attach something to it in order to make it like tangible and of course usable from a artist perspective, right? So we do have a few questions in the Q&A that I want to try to address if we can. Maybe we'll start with the one from Lynn about improvisation. She asks, what suggestions do you have for those who are primarily like concert or orchestral instruments, oboe or, you know, cello or something like that?
The first step is, I mean, there's lots of great lists out there of great artists. It's a good idea to check out really well-known artists on your instrument, because what I found is what you put in is what's going to come out. You know, it's just like eating, right? You eat something that's garbage, it's going to hurt later. You know, and the same thing goes with music. If you're putting in, oh, that's how it sounds when the saxophone is really swinging, then you start emulating with your voice. Like emulate with your voice, your number one tool that's attached to your brain, right? And by doing that, it becomes a more real experience for you. So like every transcription that I've ever done has started with me listening to it a bunch, like really like savoring all of it, you know, and then singing along with any solo that I really love. And you start to internalize it in a really special way. And then if you are able to, write it down. There's this cool app. I don't know if you guys can see this, but I have an app on the bottom left. It's called ASL Lite, but it's called Amazing Slowdowner.
Oh yeah, sure,
But
sure, sure.
so I just recently downloaded it because I have a student that has a hard time hearing intervals. And so I don't, I said, if you slow it down enough, you can hear one pitch to the next. Do, do, sing it, pause it, sing it, loop it. Do, 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 do. What does that interval sound like to you? Does it remind you of a song? Sit with that interval for a little while. And the more you get familiar with your intervals, then it'll be easier to hear chords because those are two intervals at least. And then you put sevenths on top of it. That's another interval. So you're like from the bottom up, you're starting to really understand what the harmony is. And then when you compare it to what the soloist was doing at that moment, you're getting inside the soloist's head.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to do. Like, if you're learning how to be a public speaker, you'll probably listen to someone who's, really good on the microphone and pay attention to the spacing. Pay attention to the dynamics. And pay attention to the contrast, the dramatic effect. Like there's the things that you can pay attention that you're like, oh, I like that. The delivery was that much more impactful because of those little, things that people like to use. Same thing with improvisation. Like that first solo that I did, the Thad Jones solo, I remember hearing like that shake at the top is like, whoa, So sometimes it's nice to sprinkle in a little shake here and there because it's a tasteful place to, make it feel like you've arrived at the peak of the solo or something.
Yeah.
But,
it occurs to me, and you're making a lot of like food analogies and flavor analogies, which I love. I totally jive with that. Like, I wonder if it's kind of a bit like, especially for those who are in the concert band or orchestral mindset, like a cook who only follows recipes, right? Rather than kind of knowing the recipe internally. It's like you might have a recipe that says garlic and cream and cilantro or whatever you're putting together, but because you're reading the recipe, you don't really see how the things are working together inherently or intrinsically. It's like you gotta know the recipe by heart. It's like,
I have an analogy like that. Sorry to interrupt, but
no.
Imagine if you were in a kitchen and someone tried to play a trick on you and pulled all of the labels, on the spice bottles. Are you doomed?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you really familiar with the smell and the taste of this particular flavor?
Yeah.
This would taste good here.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna put that sharp 5 right there. That's a nice place for that.
It's so funny you bring that up because I did that like 2 years ago. I put all of our spices in unmarked jars, and my wife hates me for it. She's like, "Is this like cumin or cardamom? I don't know. Like, what is it?"
That's hilarious.
You gotta smell it. You gotta take.
That's it. Spend some time with it, and you're gonna find that some pop out at you, like the chili powder. Like, ooh, you can feel that one, But I don't know. It might be a little harder to be able to tell the difference between oregano and thyme, for example.
Can you hear my keyboard? Like, can you hear this?
Diminished. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like these flavors are recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're very strong flavors. Those are things that once you learn the name of them, it's like, oh, every time I hear that, I know that that's the cardamom flavor, or that's the hot spice or whatever I'm looking for.
That's the best way. When I think about writing music, so obviously I started by transcribing because I didn't know how to express the ideas that I had, right? Even though, yes, I had a fountain of ideas in my mind, I didn't have the understanding or know how to put it on paper or to express it. So the more that I transcribed and I started to see how other people were doing that, I would take like little bits of, oh, I really liked the way that they went from this chord to this chord. Or, that's such a nice flavor to go from for one of my favorite flavors that I remember just being like, oh, this is so amazing, is the natural 9 on a half diminished chord, voice leading down a half step to the sharp 5 of the 5 chord.
To No,
So
sorry.
like do a G
Yeah.
half diminished major 9. So an A on top, A natural. Da, and then go down a half step when you go to the C7 sharp 5. Da, and then go down a half step, and it could resolve to either major, minor, or diminished major.
Oh, sorry. Okay, got you.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. And so
such
these
a
are the things that kind of like inform your compositions then, like your favorite musical flavors, right?
yeah, because every note that you play on any chord is a selection. It's your choice. Like you have 7 notes, or depending on which scale or scale you're thinking of. Like if it's diminished, obviously you have 8 notes, but mostly you have 7 options, or 4 alterations that you could possibly use on top of that. And the more you're aware of like what a major sounds like with the 9 on top, oh yeah, that 9 is really nice. Maybe I'll make a melody that focuses on that 9, or maybe I'll have a melody like one of my favorite ones to talk about in terms of like how tasty it is Blue and Green. It starts on the sharp 11 to the sharp 9. Like, whoa, those are some of the spiciest flavors. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, of course. So let's because you're speaking about some compositions, and I'd love to feature one of your original compositions off your record,
sure.
Behind the Groove. And so I believe you have the score for this and the audio. Do you want to play like the last half of it? We only have about 9 minutes left, so
sure,
maybe the last half of it, and you can kind of show some of the
sure,
of your
absolutely. I'll show you some of the techniques that I've picked up along the way. Let's see. Okay, I already have it pulled up. And by the way, I wrote this for my organ group, but in finale, the organ sounds terrible. So I actually wrote it out in another track called the bass part, and then the piano is playing the chords, so that when I sent a MIDI recording, it doesn't sound horrible. So the musicians can look at their parts and have an idea of what it sounds like. So, but you're actually going to hear the finished recorded version of it, and I'll show you the score. I'll start at the beginning, and then I'll continue to the end.
Perfect.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5. I love this suspended feel. And then the 1 chord on the 3 is really nice. Melody up here. Counter lines that I've heard. I learned this from Thad Jones, so I'm taking some little clues. Bells. To the solo section, and then I'll take you to the end of the drum solo. Oh, well, before I take you there, I also want to say that a lot of the melodies that are here are very diatonic. So if you were to see this on paper, it's mostly using one scale, but as you can hear, the harmony is all over the place. Which the reason for that is because I love how certain degrees of different scales and chords sound so much better than if they were just the diatonic versions of it. So something that I ripped off of, like, I don't know, Wayne Shorter, Freddie Hubbard, Coltrane, stuff like that. But anyway, here comes the next. Four over five. I don't know what all this is, but it's obviously the same thing. Very diatonic sounding, but then on the five, but I have a completely non-diatonic chord.
Oh man,
So
beautiful.
thanks, man. So a lot of different things that I've learned from transcribing different people, and being able to, oh, I'm hearing this, and I remember that one guy did this really cool movement from that to this. Oh yeah, I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah.
So
So there's one final question that I want to get to in the Q&A, and this probably leads to one thing that I was asking you about, like what your next steps are. And the question is again from Lynn, and she asked, what are some tips or what advice would you give in terms of getting gigs, and especially creating some kind of like social media presence, or, like improving your online, or I don't know, just like presence in the scene, you know what I mean?
absolutely, and this is all new to me because you and I came up in a time where Facebook wasn't. I don't even know if it was around then. Maybe it had just started, but I didn't have a Facebook for many, many, many years until I met my now wife, who was trying to Google me after our first date, and she's like, "You don't exist." What?
That's a great story, man.
and so she made me open up a Facebook page, to put my music on there, and it was cool. I learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot, but I think that one of the things that a lot of musicians don't ever think about is what they want to be doing, how they can monetize this passion of theirs. There's not one path that leads to success, and mine definitely has meandered, talking about nicking that comet, or you know what I'm saying, like in that direction. I feel like a lot of what I've done is just gone with opportunities that have fallen into my lap. But one thing that I've been thinking about, especially as a family man, I have, 4 kids I have to deal with and make time for, and, all that good stuff. So I'm trying to maximize my time with my family and maximize my income, so as much as I love doing $30 big band gigs that, keep my reading chops on top of it, I'd rather spend that night, reading my son a bedtime story. You know what I mean? Like, those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about. So if I'm going to miss out on that $30, then I should probably do something somewhere else that is going to help with my income,
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So what's next for you? What do you have your eyes set on?
I'm doing a concert at City Winery, which is a national chain, as you may or may not know. But I'm doing the one here in Chicago a week from tomorrow. And I'm trying to only do one big gig every few months, because if I'm playing all the time, then people can come see me for nothing. But if I play one time and people really want to see me, then they're going to have to make the effort to come to that one show, which in the venue's eyes, if I sell enough tickets, then I'm a success or whatever. It's something that I'm starting to learn that I
Sure.
never thought about before. And so if it goes well, they'll have me back. You know what I'm saying? And I can plan to have big gigs like that here and there, or maybe take a tour of the city wineries or whatever. It's things that I'm learning now. I'm also trying to update people on what I'm doing online, like, hey, come to my gig, hey everyone, I exist, come, buy a ticket or whatever. And that's not me. That doesn't feel like me. But like you were mentioning earlier, I was talking about the closet Coltrane. Like, I could play all this music, but if no one's there to hear it, then it didn't make a difference, and I'm gonna have to pay the bills some other way. I definitely encourage, if you're thinking about a life as a musician, one thing that I've learned you can do is you can transcribe what other people are doing, not just musically, but literally. Like, I've been checking out Joe Coy's social media presence, for example. He's a comedian that I think is really funny, but the way he does it, if you transcribe, like, oh, he's posting this often, and he kind of has a certain look every time he does it, and he's pretty consistent about his messaging. Okay, so I can take some pointers from that. And he's not even a musician, but he's doing the social media thing right. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a matter of, like, picking the people that you want to model yourself after. And I mean, I've asked guys, hey man, can we meet up and I'll pay you, like, if it was a lesson. I just have some questions about, like, what's the best way to, at one point I was thinking maybe I'll do a lot more online lessons and stuff like that. And this one guy has a website where you sign up, you pay a monthly fee, and you have access to, like, this amazing archive of videos and stuff like that, which sounds cool. But after learning more about what it takes to really go down that path, I was like, I don't know if I really want to spend all that time. I really enjoy the one-on-one thing a lot more.
Yeah.
So if I just up my prices, and my mom and my wife, she said it's really important to set your price to something that that is comparable to. So, like, I took a lesson from Sergei Nikaryakov, for example.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, I just call him up and, like, hey man, you want to? Because they're in the same business as we are, so why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And we talked about trumpet a lot, but I said, hey, how do you pace yourself for these concerts? And he's like, well, if I'm getting paid this much, then it makes sense. I can really focus on, like, delivering the best that I can at this particular concert, and then on to the next thing and on to the next thing. And just, you got to have the foresight to know what you can handle and what's going to feel right for you and for your finances.
Yeah.
So
that's so interesting and so smart. Yeah, man, this was just such a great conversation. I'm so glad we got a chance to sit down and talk, and you got a chance to share your story with all of our students today. This is going to be, obviously, has been recorded. It'll stay up on our YouTube in the studio playlist. So for those folks who didn't get a chance to make it today, they can always watch it there. And we can always shoot this link out on all of our social medias, and you all can as well. Thank you so much for your participation, for all the attendees, and make sure to follow Victor on all of his social media. You will love the content if you love what you were hearing today. Just incredible stuff. So thank you so much, Victor.
Oh man, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, brother. Have a good one.
We'll see you next week for In the Studio, same time.
All right.
Bye.
See y'all. Bye.